All right. So let's go ahead and talk about karma in a really useful and wholesome way.
Oh,
Uh, Normally, it has especially the word karma or karma, has a lot of baggage,
yeah.
much of which is in fact magical.
Mm,
Um, and so when the word karma finally came to the English language, it came loaded down with a lot of baggage
mm,
that the word didn't have in the time of the Buddha. That
mm,
when the Buddha was using the word karma, he was actually meaning just action.
mm,
Now, there was a well known teaching of the time about the Brahmins that he partially agreed with.
mm,
In other words, the Buddha said, yes, there is actions that give good results, or in fact, you could call them good actions because they gave good results.
mm,
And there are actions that give bad results. And
mm,
these things sometimes are very, very consistent. Um, an example of that is that there are robbers on that particular pathway. They stay there, they're waiting for you.
mm,
And if you go down that path, it's going to happen. Okay, so this is the way that we begin to understand that things get into a habit of going, and that the whole teaching of the Buddha is to come out of that karma
mm,
and to come out of it whenever we recognize it.
mm,
So, um, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa actually has an article, an old article that got resurfaced on Lion's Roar
mm,
called Karma, The
mm,
Choice is Yours.
mm,
And what he's pointing at there in this regard of karma is actually can be seen in two ways. One is the karma that we keep repeating,
mhm,
the samsara quality of it, that we
mhm,
keep doing it over and over and over again. But we also have to see it as the result of having it become a habit.
mm,
And so we do the same things over and over again.
mm,
Now, really, technically, there's a problem with good or bad. Good action gives good results. An example is you invest in the stock market. If the stock goes up, then the original buy was a good action. If the
mm,
stock goes down, then the original buy was a bad action. It's really simple like that. Okay, so that means that the outcome and
mm,
our liking or not liking of the outcome is in fact what determines whether the karma was good or bad in the first place.
mm,
And this is something that the Brahmins just completely missed out on.
mm,
Okay, because they're trying to think that, oh well, even if we cannot label the karma as to whether it was a good or bad,
mm,
uh, we kind of think that it's going to perpetuate forever, so that a good action will eventually give its good result, and a
mm.
bad action will eventually give its bad result. But that's getting really religious. That the
Yeah.
Buddhist idea about karma is that it's more of a cause effect relationship. If you
Mm,
do this, that will happen.
mhm. Because just because as far as I'm aware, there's not really a metaphysics that would explain how one's actions in one life transfer over. So it
That's
seems to
why
me,
the Buddha taught against that.
yeah. Okay.
And yet, that particular belief that he so strongly taught against winds up being part of what most people believe. Well, that's because that belief was widespread.
Mm,
And even as Buddhism spread as, let us say, a bunch of bhikkhus walking around grubbing for food,
mm,
because that's how it all got started anyway,
mm,
that's not going to necessarily change the mood of the general population.
mm,
that's still true in Thailand. That the general farmer, low class, uneducated person in Thailand, the masses, the larger part of the population, in fact, do believe those things, and that many places they learn about it is not only at their mama's knee, but at the Wat. But the Wat, the leaders of the Wat and the men at the Wat may, in fact, know more about what's going on than they're willing to teach the kids, because after all, mom's standing there. You got to wait and get the kid over to the side and says, "Come here, kid. I got some news for you." But meanwhile, the fear is that if you tell the kids the truth, then they will become uncontrollable. That the whole point of the teaching of good and bad karma gives good and bad results no matter what is to keep our society in line. It's trying to tell people you got to be responsible for your behavior.
So what you're saying is that the kind of more commonly understood idea of karma is something that's a later perversion of the Buddha's original teachings, and that its intent and
It's
effect.
an earlier thing. Yes,
Okay.
that view was there before the Buddha came by. Part of the awakening is to recognize that whole field trip into magical airy fairyland is a side trip. That if you really want to fix your life's problems, you got to get into these life's problems rather than magical thinking about some better future. If I do this all my life, I'll have a better life next time.
Yeah.
Was exactly the promise that the Brahmins were making in the first place.
The Brahmins.
The Brahmins got it started.
Yeah,
and what they said, because basically the very short part of the story is they were losing power and prominence. And they were trying to justify their positions. And their position was that we are Brahmin, we are born to Brahmin, we are the priests, we're the ones who run this religion, and that we are born Brahmin because we were good in the past. And because you were not good in the past, you were not born Brahmin. And that was their shtick. And that came about, and it's actually in the Vedantas in about 800 BC. So the Buddha come along about 300 years later after it became widespread and says, oh no, wait a minute. Now we are 2,500 years later, all total about 2,800 years, and this old rumor now the Brahmins started is worldwide and then deeply entrenched into our culture. Where in fact, in the time of the Buddha, it was really easy for people to get talked out of that magical thinking because it wasn't really that old and widespread. So that's one of the things to look at, and that was a major part of his teaching, is the teaching of anatta. Anicca anatta. That he only teaches one thing, and that is dukkha and dukkha nirodha, which means that when anicca happens, you either take the high road, dukkha nirodha, or you take the low road into dukkha. If you're awake, naturally you'll choose which one to go to. But if you're not awake and it's on automatic pilot, you got to choose whatever automatic pilot chooses for you. Half the time, at least, it's going to be wrong. And so this is the basic foundation of the teaching of the Buddha, is that this issue of rebirth that is referring to, and I'll make this distinction for the moment, rebirth versus reincarnation. Now, reincarnation is what is normally referred to nowadays, to where all of the Buddhists in town will always correct you to say, oh no, it's not reincarnation, it's rebirth, and yet they themselves don't know the difference, nor do they know where or how to find the distinction, but they know at least at one time somebody knew way back when, because that's why it's come to be the way that it is. In fact, there's a very good point and that is that there is no self that is reborn. There's no that consciousness or whatever people mistake of as the self is not what's reborn. But actions do beget actions in sometimes very complicated ways. But that this is not the point about that the Buddha is making on rebirth, but that the real point of rebirth is that each person, day by day, sometimes hour by hour and moment by moment, will be born in a different state than they were a moment ago. Okay,
To
for
return
instance,
it.
someone can become angry. Go ahead, ask your question. We'll do
Oh
anger in a
no,
moment.
just to return to what we were discussing the other day. Is every moment of apprehension of every time that an object enters the mind, is that a moment in which there is potential for rebirth? Does it happen at a kind of micro level, is what I'm saying? Yeah.
Instinctually so. Well below the thought level, even below the feeling level, way down at the instinctual level is where this stuff springs from. So let's use the example of getting angry. When someone gets angry, who are they? Well, the first and important description would be, say, they are angry, or he would say, I am angry, if he's willing to tell the truth. Okay. So I am angry means now that the anger is the bigger deal. The self is below that. That the self is the lower dog, and the upper dog is the anger. I am angry means I'm caught by it. All right. So that's an identification. It's almost as if that identification with the anger is instinctual, but the reality of the situation is no, I'm not angry. There is just anger there. And as long as I'm angry, that means that it will be under his own guidance and control, under his own automatic pilot, and I have got no choice because I'm along for the ride. And if that anger takes me into hell, if it goes to hell, then I go along with it because now I am attached to that anger, or better still to say the anger is in control of the situation. He's got me. That, in fact, that's what is the identification. So when anger is up, that means it's the only thing that is there for me to identify with. But if I'm not identifying with anything, then I'm not the anger. It's just, there it is.
Yeah, I mean,
now we can do something about it.
Yeah. Like there's that thing that Thich Nhat Hanh says about if you feel anger, you should kind of cradle it like it was a child. Like there's a kind of way of acknowledging it as part of oneself, as a process that's happening that isn't that's one of kind of almost extending metta towards it, or trying to to not deny it, to not suppress the anger, do you know what I mean? Like that seems to me a more
certainly do.
Yeah.
I don't know about what he that Thich Nhat Hanh is known to have said that, but he's pointing at something that someone else uses that terminology for. Eric Berne talks about the child ego state, which is Freud's id, which in fact that's the source of the anger. Okay, but the source of the anger was actually the child got angry because of what the parent of the parent ego state has done. If you want to think about it from an internal dialogue. Okay, what kicked the child in the pants to make him angry? Okay, and so we can look at that in the sense of the dialogue from the past. That impacted the kid, that gave rise to those feelings of unhappiness, and that immediately became the anger. So it is, in fact, the child who is doing all of the emoting.
Mm-hmm.
And that what we're in the process of doing is becoming the adult in the room, to put the frontal cortex in play, to become the adult. And the adult in the room is the one that's going to settle this squabble between the child and the parent. It's sort of like a psychotherapy, to where mom and the kid's not getting along, so they come to the therapist. Okay, so now the meditator becomes the therapist between the misbehaving kid and the domineering parent. Now, the Buddha has exactly all three of these things, in the sense that the, the the parent and the child are in fact the first and the second fetter.
Okay. Yeah.
The parent and the child are the first and second fetter, which means that the personality view, or who I am, or basically how I feel about myself, is that child ego state that is normally being trounced and feels all of the results of the anger and frustrations of life. Because the parent ego state is that which is doing the yak, 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 all of that stuff, all of that learned behavior that we have, that we can now sum up as society. Now, the relationship between society and the individual, or the relationship then between the parent and the child, is such that the child goes along to get along. It does what it's told to do. It, in fact, becomes a draft animal for that society. And what does the draft animal do? Well, he has to go to school for years and years and years, and when he's fit to work, they put him to work.
A
But
draft
they
animal.
never give
What's a draft animal?
the draft animal. That's the human race. Okay, the draft animal. You can actually. I remember a good story about that. There was a donkey in India, and this donkey had a bit of a collar around, and to support that he was carrying a log, a cut down tree log, about 4 inches in diameter. And that the center point of that log then turned to millstone, and this donkey had 30 feet to go around. And that's what that donkey did. And that in the millstone, the guy who was there put sugar cane in, and out came sugar cane juice. And so the man sold the sugar cane juice to the passerby. Guess who gets no sugar cane juice?
Yeah.
Okay. Or another example is this wonderful, beautiful pasture this horse lives in. Nice club, eating things. It's fenced off, but what the heck. But then they strap him to a plow and make him plow the place, tearing up his dinner for years to come. So that they can plant groceries that he's not going to be able to eat. They'll feed him hay instead.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Now, if that donkey or that horse had any idea what was going on, they'd rebel. But they don't. They're stupid, right? Just like us humans. Only the cloud that we pull is a little more sophisticated, and so we're confused. We think we're supposed to pull this plow.
So are we talking about, have we moved from an analogy of the parent-child sort of inner model to something to do with how we relate to society and our role within it? Or is this...
Right, that parent, in fact, the parent ego state that Byrne is talking about is in fact the sum total of the learned society that the individual carries around as an adult. Okay? But the parent ego state quality of it is because that's how we treat society as if our remembered memories of society is what orders us around to live our lives according to its dictates, which wind up making us more draft animal like and less human. And so this is the Pali word for this is Sila Bhatta Paramasa.
Which translates as
Badly translated as attachments to rites, rules, and
yeah,
rituals.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But more loosely, it's attached to anything about how anything should be done. It's all of our shoulds, our woulds, our coulds, our oughtas.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong fetter. If that's a fetter, it's a very strong one.
I'm sorry,
That's a
what?
big one. That's a big one. That's that internalized programming, that learned behavior, those learned assumptions, those ways in which one conditions and limits one's behavior based on a set of regulations that you've kind of learned. It really is. They're really very strong, and like quite often, you know what I mean? No, but they are.
I do. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Like that's a big one. And I think that, you know, in meditation, this is why it's really interesting to now talk about this in a more theoretical sense, because in the experience of sitting, I will quite often get that inner voice coming to me and narrating things, and it quite often takes the form of my dad, you know, like it will be
Eric Byrne knows you
yeah.
very well, and he's been dead for 70 years.
But yeah, I mean, and then I observe my own mind, and I'm like, oh God, fucking hell, like that's really like cliched or something. And I'll be having these arguments. It doesn't happen. I'm getting better at meditating basically, but that process of disentangling oneself from that conversation, it's not to say that it doesn't happen in the mind, but you can understand that it's just another process. And
Yes, and you can also, from the very nature of it, from what I gather from you, you would prefer not to have that particular process going on.
yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
so that would mean that you would consider that process an unwholesome thought sequence.
Yeah.
Therefore, you would catch it and throw that out.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
sharp, if you're on guard, if you're woke.
yeah. Well, I mean, this is
And
why.
what happens is that the weight of that, it keeps its own perpetual motion going. But if you start chopping that thing up and say, you stop, you
Mm-hmm.
stop, you stop, it gets weaker and weaker. It doesn't get that full cycle going. It doesn't get its 5 minutes of play out time to keep the habit going. That now the habit is getting cut off in 10, 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, and the first step to that is sati, isn't it? But before you can cut it off, you have to perceive that it's happening.
You have to wake up. That's exactly why I keep harping on sati as the number one issue is we got to wake up to what's going on.
Yeah.
Wake up and investigate.
Yeah.
Okay. They have the cliche of wake up and smell the coffee, but
Yeah.
there's a whole lot more coffee brewing than we first, we really do need to wake up and look at all of this stuff that's brewing.
Yeah.
Including this argument that you're having with your dad. And it's interesting that we say it that way, because in that respect, our self then becomes the child ego state. Rather than seeing it's an argument between the child ego state and the parent ego state, it's between me and my dad. Isn't that interesting? That's the identification with that. Identifying with our past. But when you can say now, and it doesn't even matter what your dad is, whether he's dead or alive or in a distant country or whatever, the likelihood of you having the same conversation that you remember in your mind having with him is unlikely. Your dad's a different person, and so are you now.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
Yeah.
just old junk. It really
Yeah, it's
is.
such junk. Yeah. but it feels like a way of, it feels like a way of the mind trying to discipline itself, but you know, like it seems like it's trying to do something useful in a way, but that it's a process that's really not helpful, and it is kind of.
Well, here's the point now. You say Thich Nhat Hanh says to treat this thing, this feeling system that we have, like a child to be cared for.
Mm-hmm.
Did your dad take care of you the way that Thich Nhat Hanh is suggesting?
Yeah, that's a big question. Yes and no.
Okay. So now the question would be, can you begin to do it now? And the answer could be yes, because I've seen it before, and yes, because I know I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer now is no longer a yes and no, it's a yes and a yes.
Mm-hmm.
That I can treat myself well. This is basically at the bottom of friendship anyway, which you've heard someplace or another, and I'm a fan of the sutta. It's called the Half Sutta, where Ananda goes to the Buddha and says, I have heard that friendship is half of the Dhamma.
Mm.
And the Buddha says, oh no, Ananda, a friendship is the whole package. Which basically is boiling down to, you got to start making friends, and you wind up being friendly with everything, including that child inside.
Mm-hmm.
So that the child no longer needs nourishment because he's got it up to here already.
Mm.
But we always go around feeling unnourished, so now is the time to nourish that child.
Mm-hmm.
And how we do that is with sukha. Allow yourself to have pleasure.
Yeah, yeah.
To give the child joy rather than giving him work to do.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting in terms of trying to like working a bit more with the jhanas, trying to work out my relationship to those, and I feel like that's like progressing quite a lot. I feel like I can get to first, or what I think is first jhana pretty regularly, but it's the second is harder for me at the moment anyway.
Well, here's the thing. You will not do very well at second jhana until you actually get first jhana.
Yeah,
And so the
yeah.
immediate goal is to learn to become, let us say, skilled at being able to get into first jhana.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah,
an important skill. That takes sati. It takes work. In fact, that's the one that takes effort.
yeah.
Once each time we get into it, and we're developing the skill of getting into it more and more often, more and more frequently, the second skill is to develop maintaining or
Yeah.
staying in the first jhana.
Mm-hmm.
What is that point? That's the point where we begin to guard the mind. That we got into the first jhana partly by talking ourselves into it. Now we have to keep talking ourselves into it. We keep having to nourish that child and pay more. In fact, that would be a way of thinking about what's first jhana. First jhana is being friendly with your own child inside.
Mm-hmm.
To not be in the past and the future like the parent ego state, but just be here now. Okay, so we begin to enjoy the moment. This is first jhana, which means that thoughts that come from that parent ego state have to be kept out. And the less energy they get, then the less frequently they will bother us. And so you begin to change your personality because, in fact, this old stored memory system that we have that's so harmful to us that we got from the society, we don't have to live with that anymore as our background noise. We can find a different tune to play. Something more modern. Jazz things up.
Yeah.
Put some boogie in the road.
Yeah.
So this is a way of working with it to recognize those kind of thoughts are not wholesome.
Yeah.
that they're demanding. They want things. They don't like things. They want to change things. So getting all of those kind of thoughts out, and the kind of thoughts in of, wow, this is very nice. Wow, what a delicious moment. It's almost like ice cream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that puts us actually, and I haven't thought about it like that before, but that's basically what we're talking about here, is allowing the real dialogue to go on, is between the parent, between the adult and the child, so that the adult directs traffic, and that the parent ego state is now quieted down, is put out of service, and that we go by wisdom. And part of the wisdom is that we know that this is just a child ego state of the mind. It is not who I am. That in fact, if there is anything, it's that I am the adult in the room now.
Yeah.
And after we make that change of identity, then we can even change that to where, oh no, there is no me here. There is just this wonderful, beautiful relationship between the adult and the child. And there ain't no me in there. It's just I. In fact, if there is anything, that's the observation of this process going on. But still, there's no self in there. But in the beginning, we have this personality view, and the Buddha talks about it is that, yes, Silabbata Paramasa is a heavy, heavy, heavy duty. But it's not even as heavy as the self. This attachment to the self that identifies with organizations we become identified with by joining, or even mentally joining, a political party or a church or a town. Okay, like even though the address here is Bantai, I am not of or in Bantai. If anything, it's somewhere else out there. So we lose identification with things altogether, because the identification system that we have was actually part of that parent ego state. We learned, this is all learned behavior, and it's all old garbage that really doesn't mean anything now. An example of that is, so long as I've got a passport, who cares what country's name is on it? Within limits. But I don't identify with any particular passport because the name of the country is in there. Doesn't mean I'm that kind of person. I don't qualify as that. I like the line that Groucho Marx said. He said, I would never join any organization that would have millions of
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a really good one.
It's really excellent. All right? It's really excellent, which means don't join anything, because anything that we join, there we feel. If we donate any amount of money to a candidate, then we start watching how that candidate is doing. Are they going up and down, up and down, up and down? And they keep asking for money. And so they're up and down and they're up and down, but now they keep wanting money. It doesn't matter how much money they send you, they keep wanting more money, more money, more money. That's the whole point of the campaign. That's why they call it a campaign. They're out there looking for money. And so people who get sucked into that, they wind up in a whole lot of bad feelings, because now not only have I given my money to that candidate, now I am that candidate. And if he loses the election, I have lost the election.
But I mean, it's interesting that you talk about money, because I mean, this analogy it doesn't really hold much water, maybe. But I think, I mean, could you think of karma as a kind of currency, as a way of paying in? And I mean, you used the stock market analogy before, but that there's something that can be thought of as, because one of the like more beautiful ideas, I think, or the more kind of, for me, more profound ideas, is the fact that I'm connected to the world in ways that I don't even realize, that there's a kind of complexity of interaction, you know?
Yes, yes. This is what the investigation is all about. Okay, this is why we need to have the mind fit for work, is because that's what in fact, that's the job of the adult.
Right.
Is to investigate this mess.
Yeah. But
but not investigating in the sense that there's a big mess that needs to be investigated. It's more like that the things that need to be investigated come one at a time as they occur, moment by moment. Here's yet something new that needs to be investigated. Here's something new that needs to be investigated. So even calling it a mess is putting a time capsule around it that doesn't belong. So long as we stay focused that everything has to be done, including skill development, right in this very moment. And then the forward knowledge is, if I can do it now, I can do it again. That's the forwarding point. If I can do it now, I can do it again.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think sometimes in meditation, I've tried to kind of I've tried to remind myself of like, try to enjoy the moment, use sati to bring myself back to the present moment, and then try and sort of generate sukha and just not quite feeling it, you know? And then that can feel like another way.
But that's so common.
Yeah.
That is so common. I knew you were going there when I heard you first use the word try.
Yeah.
All right. That, too, is a hindrance to be seen. The not feeling it, trying it and not getting it. And when you say, aha, I can see that going on, too. All right. Now, there's also the quality that T.A. Continuing Mary Byrne, there's the quality of getting permission. It's okay for you to relax. It's okay for you to feel good. It's okay for you to go on vacation from this set of rules that you built up. You need permission to do that. Okay? Which means you need the protection of the adult mind to keep the hindrances at bay long enough for you to get into that state. And that therein will give you the power of saying, yes, I can. Yes, I can. I can feel good, even though this feeling good is not as good as I want to feel. It's good enough right now. Because, see, that's where we get into that one last hindrance of I want more. This is good, but I want more. No, this is good enough.
Yeah. I think that I'm getting better at that. That's definitely developing, and I think it's something that's, just to return to jhana practice, I think that's something that was a real hindrance at the start, was feeling like I was about to maybe enter first jhana and getting really like excited, but like, what if I don't make it? And you know, that kind of voice of tightness and anticipation and a preemptive sense of potential failure was the thing that prevented me from getting it, you know?
But right, and here's where the bottom line of that is that you wanted it. Oh, did you want it?
Yeah.
Okay? And the very wanting it is a state that prevents us from being in a state of not wanting anything, which is first jhana. And so that's why we have to practice with this quality of satisfaction.
Yeah.
Even if there's a little bit of satisfaction, give that notice. Give the kid credit for he can do a little bit of satisfaction.
Yeah.
Satisfaction is a skill to be developed. It is like a muscle to be developed.
that's definitely it. Yeah. Yeah, because because I can develop the PT quite regularly now, quite reliably. I mean, I kind of feel it when I'm walking around, not even in meditation, and that's been a really transformative thing for me. But the sukha is something I feel like that is less developed in me in general in life, or has been historically.
Okay. Well, you can think of sukha and piti as actually having almost all of the same qualities. Okay. One of them is the quality of satisfaction. The other one is the quality of security and safety or contentment. The rapture or the feeling, the really good one, has to do with the feeling of success, or I can do this. Wow. Okay. When you have that kind of rapture, you've got sukha built right into it. With the idea that when the rapture or the piti kind of wears off like a spurt of a faucet, they go, and then it's got a steady flow. That steady flow will then be the resultant of the sukha. So it's a matter of the kind of pressure that we put in there, and or the benefit of the right effort. And so the sukha is actually the resultant part of the piti. At that level, we can actually start to think of them as just one feature. And that the word that's normally used is the piti, because the piti does give way to the sukha if we can maintain it.
It's the maintaining I need to work on, it sounds like.
Right,
yeah.
Not going after second jhana. No, we need to learn to get into that first state of jhana and be able to stay there, to be able to guard the mind and to keep the mind focused and in the present moment, to keep enjoying it. How much pleasure can you stand? Well, another 3 or 4 minutes anyway.
Yeah.
And so this is the way that we're practicing, rather than going into any deep states or whatever, but to really lighten up, to really lighten up, to let go of this old collection of rules and rituals that we call society, or Byrne called parent ego state. Freud called it superego. But it's basically all of the things that we tell ourselves about what we should do, and most of it has to do with because we've been such good little animals that we're just repeating par for the course. That's just, keep going along to getting along. Now, there's another one. This is kind of cute, and that is that basically this Silabbata Paramasa that we're talking about is instinctual. And it's fairly clearly easy to see the instinct and the instinctual nature of it in the sense of the herding instinct or the nesting instinct. That whenever there's any danger, the wildebeest will all collect together in a small little patch, and they'll stay that way in the night for self-protection. That the herd is protected, and the guys who were deepest into the herd are the ones who were the most safe, and the guys who were on the outside are the ones who were in danger. Okay? So a wise society, they'd have all the big tough ones on the outside and have the women and the children on the inside. And that's the way that we do things when we go into that herding mentality. But it's deeper than even mammals, because we know that fish school that same way, and birds flock that same way. That they collect together in tight little packets. Well, guess those tight little packets, and humans do it too. There's all kinds of various places that we've talked. Mob behavior, for instance, is that herding behavior. So The example is the sheep and the sheepdog. That the sheep go along because they're afraid of the barking dog, and the dog, even though he's a loudmouth, he feels like that he's the boss here, and as he's barking, he's making himself bigger, while the sheep are so dumb that they think that he's a big tough dude, and so they get all into a herd, and he can bark over here and bark over there and guide them as a herd right to the gate, and they're completely manageable. But if one of those old sheep had the idea, wait a minute, I'm bigger than that dog, and you are too. Why don't the 2 or 3 of us just go and say hello to that dog? And then we go down there and we surround him, and the dog is bark, 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 and we're standing here. Shut up, dog. And so this is where human behavior comes in that will override that instinct. But animals like the sheep, they don't have it. But humans, we can wake up to that. Wait a minute. I don't have to go along to get along. I don't have to act like that dumb animal. I don't have to do what my daddy told me to do anymore. I'm a big adult now. I'm bigger than that barking dog. And so that whole new attitude of things is a very important quality of changing our attitude about I'm in the herd because I'm afraid. And to know I'm not afraid, therefore I can leave the herd.
There is nothing to fear out there. The dog's not going to bite you.
Right. In fact, you're bigger than the dog is. You can butt him and throw him in the air. Right. So this is where wisdom then comes in, as we can see what's going on. We can change this instinctual behavior that is driven by all the rites, rules, and rituals. And so basically we're giving this child ego state these instincts, a breather, giving them a rest by not having all of these orders, all of these barking dogs of society. We stop listening to it. And the best way to do it is not, we can wake up from time to time when it's going on, then that's sati. That's exactly what we want to do. But once we wake up, we want to wake up enough so that we can maintain a guard to keep that kind of trash out of the mind. That's where the value of first jhana really comes in, is that we can clean out the mind and keep it clean. Another way of talking about it is like the mind is a monkey mind, and it jumps from tree to tree and all over the place. And our job in first jhana is to keep the monkey in just one tree. What is that one tree? It's the wholesome tree. It's the tree that narrows the boundary so that it doesn't jump all over the place. It just has to jump on the limbs of this tree. And when it jumps into that tree over there by mistake, we grab him and we pull him back into this tree again. Okay, and so this is the way that we begin to train the mind. And if we can get the monkey to just stay in one tree, we've got a good chance of training him completely.
So you would recommend that in terms of building a good jhana practice now, it's just to focus on the first and let what will happen. You know, is that right? Like,
if you get well skilled in the development of being able to sustain the first jhana, develop it to get into it easily and sustain it easily, then I will tell you about the second jhana.
Okay, good.
So
cool.
let's get the skills we need first.
Yeah.
Because in fact, the skill of leaving the first jhana is in fact the skill of entering the second jhana, because the unskillful leaving the first jhana is because we fell out of it, we couldn't maintain it.
Yeah. That's more.
There's a skill in leaving the first jhana.
That's how I normally leave it, to be honest. But I can get there quite regularly. It's just it's just the sustaining of it, and and now that what we've spoken about, I can see a kind of broader context in which that would help purify the mind and help kind of strengthen that adult voice, and how it kind of feeds into everything.
Yes. Exactly.
It's so well thought out. It's ridiculous. I don't know how he did it.
All we're doing is filling in the little dots here and there, but the basic framework is right back to the Buddha. He figured out this.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
And it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah, it's incredible just to see how it all fits together and be like, oh, that really works. Oh, yeah, that makes loads of sense. And like I can experience that with my own brain just by sitting down, my mind and body, and it. Yeah,
but that's like the confidence. When you're having those thoughts, that's the confidence building. Yeah, that's right. What I have heard and what I have read and what I have done fit together. It works.
Yeah,
I can see it for myself. It works, and I'm successfully getting it working. Wow! Now that's
definitely.
So now is the time to give that kid a swing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did it, kid. You did it.
Yeah. Nice one. Okay.
So we've got a plan now. Get into it often and stay into it often, and we'll talk about getting out of it later.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dhammarato. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you later. Have a good day.
It's been delightful. I enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, me too. I'll speak to you soon. All right. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.